But that goes back to Moses.
You guys always end up in such good conversations that I'm hesitant to say much myself because we never get far enough. But I feel like if we want a hope of getting out of here by 7:30, that I should probably start. One of you can volunteer to teach next week too. That's always a possibility.
I vote for Russ.
I think
You got the black shirt on.
I think you do look the most like me right now. And since Russ comes up with our questions for us every week, he's probably got a good start.
Not capable.
So we start with Jesus choosing the 12 apostles. And one of the things that you have to know about the scriptures is remember that the verses and the chapters aren't original. Like that was added later. And the chapters are for the most part better designed than the verses. The verses get sometimes they very much chop things. The chapters, usually they put the chapters in pretty good spots. There's only a few places where I think our current scholarship would like us to have them moved. But it's one of those things that once you've done it that way for so long, you just really can't undo it because you can't move where the chapters are because then, hundreds of years of stuff would have to be changed and it would invalidate things. So they are what they are. It's divided up. But just remember that those are a later addition. They're not part of the canonical text. Neither are the titles that they give you, where they give you those little section titles of everything. Like Jesus heals a paralytic, Jesus does this, Jesus is that, feeding of the 5,000. None of that is actually part of the biblical text. So there's some Bibles, usually they're called Reader's Bibles, that actually just give you the biblical text from beginning to end. They usually do it in more of a novel form. So instead of doing 2 columns, it'll be on pages like a book would read. I don't know why Bibles have adopted the 2-column thing for so long, but they have. I mean, that goes back centuries, maybe even a millennium, where they did 2 columns. I'm just not quite certain why that is the case. So we have this whole series of miracle stories, and then right at the end of chapter 9, we had that part about asking the master of the harvest to send out laborers for his harvest. And what you find is in our commentary, they group the end of chapter 9 and chapter 10 together. But because my notes are getting so much longer, I took them and split them apart. And I wanted to be able to there was just too much to say, and I felt like if one chapter got to be 15 or 20 pages, you would groan a little bit, and I would groan a little bit, because that feels like a lot of material to cover at once. So, Jesus sees the need for laborers. And this is actually one of the most fascinating things I think about the person of Christ, because he doesn't preach to that many people. I mean, you have to set this up in your mind. Jesus doesn't talk to that many people in his lifetime. I mean, even if he talked all day, every day, the man only lived for something like 30 years, 35 years, give or take. 33 is a classic number, but if it was 34 or 32, I'm not too worried. But he doesn't actually preach to that many people. And that's a really odd thing, because what we say about Jesus is that he came to bring the message of salvation. This is necessary to go to heaven. And you would think that a message of salvation has to be preached to people, or you can't justifiably send them to hell. That wouldn't be good. And yet he doesn't preach to that many people. And so it sets up a significant problem. I mean, he probably doesn't even preach to all of the people living in Israel at the time. And Israel was a small country, much less, the people in Rome and the people in China and the people that lived in North America and all of these other places. Now, there were many fewer people in the world. For much of human history, it's likely that the world had a population somewhat less than 100 million in the world at a given time. Now, our population in the United States, I think, is like 360, 370 million officially, somewhere around there. Maybe 380. But Jesus doesn't preach to them all. And so I would hope that you would ask yourself, well, if he's not going to preach to them, what is he going to do? Because you've set up this monster problem. You're bringing a message of salvation that's necessary, in some sense, for every man and woman to hear, and you're not going to tell them? Well, the second part of that is this operation that he begins. Now, one can ask, how many times did Jesus send out people? There's his choosing of the 12 that we hear in this section. I think in one of the Gospels, there's a 77 that he sent out. I think in one set, are there 40 pairs? There's like he has a number of missions, and are they all the same mission? Did they get the numbers wrong? Did people have different numbers? Did he send out more than one batch of missionaries? I think that's kind of, I would like to think, and I think that there's good evidence that Jesus probably sent out missionaries in a number of waves for places that he intended to visit. He picks 12 apostles. This is probably related to the 12 tribes of Israel, and 12 is an important number in the Bible. 4 was the number of the cardinal directions. 4 cardinal directions, we still have this today, north, south, east, west. And 3 was the number of God. So you take the number of God times the number of the cardinal directions, and you have something for the whole earth. So 12 tribes, 12 apostles. There's 12 who help Moses. And Jesus gives them authority. This is something significant. I actually have begun to think that this is where a huge part of Catholicism rises or falls, is that Jesus gives the apostles authority to act in his name. Like, it's a different way of saying it, but he sends them out to do the same kinds of things that he has been doing. And that's the same principle that we use for bishops and for the apostolic ministry, for celebrating the sacraments, that Jesus empowers bishops to communicate the sacred power to other people so that the message can reach the world. And in a large part, Jesus sends out these apostles on this mission to reach a whole group of people that he's not going to reach except through them. They're meant to carry his message and carry his word to the world. And so you could call themselves God-bearers. They don't, usually that is a little bit more formal title that we use for Mary. Mary is the God-bearer, like someone who carries Jesus, who carries the presence of God in her own body. But very much these 12 apostles who go out are God-bearers. They're bringing the presence of Jesus and the power of Jesus to act in his name to the people that they teach. And I think this is one of those really bizarre situations, because Jesus sends them out on this mission, and he says, I forget if this is in the exact text, but he talks about, like, go heal the sick, raise the dead. Does he tell them to raise the dead in this gospel? Like, how many of you would be comfortable being charged by Jesus to go raise the dead? You know, you might not, I still think that would be actually about the scariest thing that could happen at a funeral. Of all of the possibilities that you could think of that are horrifying, the dead person coming back to life is near the top of the list.
Especially if they've been cremated. Thank you.
I think
What did she say?
that, I mean, Mary, you might be the first one. That sounds like a divine mission. That you're supposed to go raise the dead and pray for people who have been cremated. I mean, that would be something. That would really be something. I mean,
Don't run from the church.
realistically, it's not all that different in content from someone who's been embalmed, because my understanding of the embalming process is that it's actually kind of, you're missing a lot of parts of you by the time you're done being embalmed. They do some very interesting things. You can find out later. That's something you can ask Google and learn about. But Jesus is sending them out on a fairly incredible mission. And they're going out to people that he probably won't reach himself. I mean, think of the kind of responsibility that entails. You're going to speak to people that Jesus is not going to reach himself, at least some of them. And so, in that situation, what would you feel? What kind of responsibility would you take on? I think it'd be really hard, because it's like, well, what do you want me to tell them? I mean, even now, to take like the whole of the Christian message like we do in OCIA and to try and teach people even all in one shot when you meet every week for a year is hard. How do you do it in like a sermon or in, some encounters with people that are maybe a few hours long? There's a lot to the Christian message. I don't know if it'll work very well. But this is what Jesus does. He's the boss. I'm not. But it is really amazing that he entrusts the apostles to go out and speak in his name and act in his name, to do the same kinds of things that he has been doing. So we had that whole series of miracle stories, 10 of them in a row, just boom, 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 one after another. And now the apostles are being sent in a very similar fashion. Like, it's sort of like, this is what Jesus does. This is the mission of the Messiah. Now go do the same thing. To act in the same way. How do you pray when you're charged with that kind of mission? Mary's going to need a companion to pray for people to be resurrected from cremation. Sounds like Mary Sattler's volunteering to go with her.
I said, don't look at me.
I know, that's exactly why. So one of the fascinating things in the background of this is most of the apostles have Greek names. Now that could be because the gospel's written in Greek, but it may also be because some of them are from the Greek community. We don't know exactly where all of the apostles are from. Many of them seem to be Jewish fishermen, but not all. And they're rather extraordinary fishermen if they are fishermen, because they actually know Scripture. And so you can't think of them as being just sort of the uneducated bums that were homeless and Jesus walked up and punted them into mission. Like, you don't learn Scripture just being a bum on the street. Otherwise, Broadway would be a very fascinating place. And the river would be even more exciting when you ride along the bike path. There would be lots of preaching if they all knew Scripture. And Jesus, one of the things that I think is scary about this, that you have to be ready to wrestle with, is they likely have not known Jesus or been with him for all that long. And I think this is something that you really have to try and take to heart. I know I do as a priest, because following Christ, I have been at it for many moons now. And it still feels like I'm at the very beginning. But the apostles know less than we do. I mean, they don't have the gift of the Holy Spirit in the same way. Jesus seems to have given them a share in his power to act and to do these miracles. Yes, but it's likely that you know Jesus better than they did. And yet most of you would feel rather terrified if Jesus appeared next to us and said, "Go, I'm sending you on a mission tonight." Even after you've known Jesus and been trying to follow him for decades. At this point in his life, they probably have been with him for less than a year.
he talked in parables, and it was, to me, sometimes would they even know what he was talking about?
Did they even know the meaning of the parables?
Right.
I mean, this is one of the rather difficult things. How much of it did they understand?
Yeah.
You know, they may not have known some of the meaning of some, and they're like, you want us to go talk to them. What are we supposed to say? Well, the same things that I've been saying. Oh, like, did you take notes?
Matthew did.
Matthew took notes,
Well, so we have some of Matthew's notes, arguably, right? But the gospel likely wasn't written until, if you're taking an early date for the gospel, maybe 55, which is 20 years after this. So there's no gospel of Matthew that guides you through, like, here's Jesus' sermons. You know, here's what the miracles looked like. And I think we have to wrestle with this. I mean, how would you feel as an apostle? Like, are you nuts? You know, like, you have lost some brain cells there, Mr. Lord Jesus teacher guy, because like us, you're sending us? And he's like, yep. And then he tells you can't even take like money and stuff along with you when you do it. I mean, the deal is getting really sweet here. It's like, follow Jesus, get called by him, be apostles, and like, oh, go. No, no extra stuff, no knowledge of the message, just do what I tell you. What was that? You know? I mean, you have to give them some credit. I mean, it speaks to that these apostles had to be very, very convicted that Jesus knew what he was doing. But my guess is many of them thought he was crazy. That this was uncomfortable.
How could they do it then if they thought it was crazy?
Because I think he kicked them out.
But I mean, wouldn't you just go home? I can't do this.
Well,
Maybe.
you could, but then what are you going to do? I mean, like, this is actually why I wanted to raise the point, is I think this can be a powerful place of prayer and a thought experiment, is what would you do? Be genuine about that. You know, if you would go home, well, then what? Do you go meet Jesus when he's back in town and then he says, how'd your mission go? Or do you go face the other apostles who went out on their mission and you didn't go out on yours? Like, then what? You know, I think, yes, it's scary, but one of the things that we have lost sight of in our lives, and I actually think is really important, is it's good for us to do things that scare us. It's good for us to do things that stretch us. And sometimes I think one of the things that people can really run into as they age is that we stop doing things that stretch us. And being stretched feels uncomfortable. And it's just kind of odd because like this shows up all over the place. When we went on the spring ed days, there was a priest there who came and we were talking and just about the rooms, and Maryvale doesn't have the nicest rooms. It's not luxury accommodations by any means. It'll be a lot nicer when they go through this renovation and fix up some things and turn it into a more habitable retreat house. But, you know, he was talking about wanting his own bathroom and how he just found it hard to conceive of life without a private bathroom because he's had that as a priest. And I hear that and I see it. But what was interesting to me is how scared he was. Well, like, I don't know what I would do. And it's like, you'd figure it out. You know? Because we get into the same thing. Well, what if this? What if this? You'd figure it out. And if you don't, I guess you're croaking. Well, then you don't. I don't know. I mean, like, what else are you going to do? But it's not actually that hard. Like, you can figure things out, and you can stretch, and you can adapt, and you can grow, and you can learn new things. And yes, it might be harder, but some of that is because it's easier as you age to lose the process of learning, to lose the process, to forget that it's going to be hard, and that it's going to push you, and it's going to pull you, and it's going to tug you. And so, you know, like, I think it's a really important example for us to consider because, like the students, we ask them to do all kinds of uncomfortable things. You know, they don't want to study, they don't want to do this, they don't want to do that. They'll come up with every excuse under the sun. And I think it's really good for them when you could say, well, yeah, and I didn't want to give you a whole presentation on human sexuality, but here we are. You know, none of my sophomores can claim not to have the sex talk with their parents because they got the double-barreled shotgun to the face from Father Keller for several weeks.
Lucky guy.
And we talked about it all. We talked about hot button cultural issues. We talked about love and marriage and how it's supposed to work. We talked about human sexuality. I mean, they got a rather extended talk on sexuality, and yeah, it was kind of scary. I didn't want to do it, but it's like, well, there's no one else. It's you or, chaos at the zoo, so figure it out. And you do. But I think that, this has to be part of our mindset, because so often it's like, well, I could never do that. Oh, really? Lots of you said you could never do things, and then you had kids, and all of a sudden you turned into superheroes and did all kinds of things you didn't think you were going to be able to do. And then it comes to Jesus, and he's like, go on mission, and you're like, no.
I think what happened, Jesus exuded this love, and he was so charismatic that they loved him so much, and that's what got them through him.
I think that could be part of it, that they loved Jesus so much and that helped pull them through. But at some point, they had to make a decision to face their fear and not run away from it. At some point, you just have to decide to dive in. And the really crazy part about leaning completely on God is that he shows up.
Yeah, that's true. I think there's such a diverse group of people, these apostles, that they go out, they trust the Lord at this point, but then you go along in the gospel a little bit further, and Gethsemane shows up.
Yeah? So do they trust the Lord more at this point and then struggle later? I'm inclined to say, actually, that we give them way too much credit. I think this was uncomfortable for them. I think this was Jesus pushing them way past where they wanted to go. But I think it's part of what made them into the men that they were and why they're saints. Because they did it. And there are probably some bumps and bruises and scratches along the way, but they did it.
I think that Jesus had a little help along the way. I mean, these men were men out of the clear blue sky. And Godfather was aware of this, and he must have installed some of that same blessings that go into your mind when you feel the religious part of what he was doing. I feel that's how they got some of their incentive to follow it.
Yeah, so that God was preparing the way before Jesus gets there.
Absolutely.
I think that's true. My only caution is that I wouldn't want, I want you to put yourself in that category and not to say that the disciples are different than me because God was preparing them for this and I'm just completely different.
Yeah, but not every individual is destined to do that. Not
How do you know?
Is destined to be a priest. And
You look like one tonight.
Well.
All you need is a collar.
That's only skin deep.
No, I hear what you're saying. Not everyone is called to live it out in the same way. But one of the reasons why I think it's important to lean into is because as Catholics, we have been terrified of the mission for a long time. And at some point, the shove is coming where there's not going to be an option, that it's going to have to be more missionary. And I think we're in the fits and starts of that happening right now. But to a certain extent, you also have to ask, what is the risk? What is the risk of talking to neighbors or inviting other people? And it could just be simple things. I mean, sometimes the most effective invitation is caramel rolls. If you have a plate of warm caramel rolls, you can probably get into anywhere on earth. If they're on a diet, that means you get extras, so it's even better for you. you can use special K-bars. You could use crocheting and quilting and gardening and walking and running. You can use barbecues on the patio or bad weather, or just about anything you want. Do you have a question? You've been waiting.
It seems like one of the main messages is it's not what you know, it's who you know. And I know that like from the military, you have different leaders, and guys would follow a really good leader. Sometimes when he said ridiculous things.
That's true.
Yeah.
Follow him, when it seemed like ridiculous things, they'd follow him. Or a doofus that might have had smarter ideas, but he was just not a good leader.
Yeah. Or people with higher ranks that weren't as good as some of the people under them. Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say too, he did send them out 2 by 2, so they encouraged one another. The Chosen does a really good
Yeah.
job of showing that.
Mary and Mary going to raise the dead.
We were there.
Raise the dead.
We're busy raising the dead.
I don't want to help, but I like to watch this.
Me quite entertaining.
See, but I feel like the challenge is that many of the apostles would have, like, when they sat around in the circle, like, they felt the same things that we do. I think they felt just as unready. I think they felt like they needed more instruction, or that they weren't the right people for the job. And I think it came down to Jesus didn't give them an option. Like he said, okay, you're going on mission. And I suspect the Chosen does this, and I think it's probably true. He's like, I'm going home to visit my mom. See you later.
Yeah,
You know, just,
I'm out.
yeah. As our Spanish teacher says, ciao, bye-bye. I don't know why that's Spanish, but she says it all the time.
Italian.
You know, and I think one of the dangers that we have is this kind of mental separation of ourselves from the apostles. That we're always trying to say that they were special and I'm not. They were called, Jesus was with them, it was easier for them, and it's harder for me. And I think that's dangerous. It happens as a priest. I mean, like this isn't something that I'm not in the middle of with you. Believe me, I'm not preaching from some high post like, yes, I've done this. Like, no, it would scare me too. I think that's one of the reasons why it's so important. The apostles do seem to have been spiritual men that knew the scriptures. Jesus wasn't starting from zero. I think that's very true. I think Russ is absolutely correct about that. The Jewish culture had a greater sense of education than we give them credit for. If you listen to modern people talk about the ancient world or the medieval world, they always talk about how illiterate it was. And yes, it was less literate than now. But in Christianity, it was a lot more literate than not in Christianity. There's a reason why the barbarians were barbaric. And the Christians were part of this civilization thing. Because the Christians believed in actually teaching people about what was real and knowledge. And significant amount of what we have today was preserved by Christians, preserved by monks in monasteries and those kinds of things. They did that. Jesus sends them out to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. And it really raises this question, because he's like, don't go to the Gentiles, don't go to the Samaritans. And I hope that bothers you a little bit. Like, why is Jesus being so exclusionary? Like, shoot, you're a Gentile. You're just up the creek without a paddle. You know, you're not Jewish. The apostles aren't going to come and visit. They're not supposed to talk to you. What is this about? Well, I think part of it, like we've said before, we really have to wrestle with, what does it mean to be Jewish? I think that's actually one of the foundational questions of the gospel. And I think the gospel gives kind of a funny answer to it. Because I think what Jesus does is he looks at a lot of the people that claim to be Jewish and says, hey, you're not really Jewish. And they're like, well, yeah, we're sons of Moses. And he's like, then why don't you do what Moses says? You actually don't listen to him, so you're not Jewish. And then it'll hold up examples of these people that aren't part of the house of Israel, but are demonstrating tremendous faith. We encountered I think in one spot, the synagogue official's child and the Roman centurion. And I mean, we've had a number of these things already where the people that Jesus was doing miracles for very clearly weren't Jewish, but were demonstrating tremendous faith. And I think the gospel is, in a sense, rewriting the history of Judaism, because I think, in a sense, what it's saying is these people who are demonstrating real faith in the Messiah are actually real children of Abraham. And these that are demonstrating like not faith in the Messiah and are treating this like a political game and are ending up in a bunch of judgment and condemnation, they're children of their father, the devil. I mean, I think those are the kind of stakes. That's from the Gospel of John. Like, I'm not making that up. It's actually a quote from the Gospels. Jesus is like, you're children of your father, the devil. That's when they get really mad at him. But it really raises, what does it mean to be part of the family of Christ? What does it mean to be part of the people of God? You know, is it something special to you? Is Christian faith something you take for granted? Who are the people of the covenant? What does people of the covenant mean? Again, because what happens is it looks like in the world, the people of the covenant are the Jewish ones, the ones who follow the Sabbath rules, the ones who do all these things, who follow all these laws. The people of the covenant are the Pharisees, the ones who have, scrupulously maintained their genetic heritage for generations. And they might look very religious on the surface. They might wear big long robes and have prayer hats and, all of these shawls and all of these things. But they're not really Jewish. Like, I think this is very much one of the ways that Christianity starts looking at our hearts, that Christianity starts looking at the inside and who we are. Because all of these people that were outside of the covenant family, I think they're really demonstrated to be people of faith. And so, in a way, I would say you should never count yourself out because of family heritage. And we have to be careful because appearances can be deceiving. Sometimes people look really holy and do lots of things that looked really holy. You have to remember that in the Gospels, the Pharisees look really holy. They were the holy rollers of the ancient world. They were the ones who were at the synagogue first and got the best spots. And they were praying long hours and they gave large amounts of money and they do lots of things that Jesus doesn't condemn. They just have some other problems that he does. But appearances can be deceiving. Real holiness is kind of quiet. It's sneaky. It's not dramatic and out front. It doesn't show up on highlight reels on the Sunday evening news. Mother Teresa was asked, how did you do what you did? How did you found this religious order? How do you take care of so many people today? I mean, one of the things about the Missionaries of Charity is that